Hello and welcome to another episode of Balaam's Corner. Today I'd like to talk to you about near-death experiences in a Christian perspective. We have all got the impression that science know what consciousness is, which is actually not true. They do not know. When a person dies, science implies with their results so far that everything is over, there is no life after. And the consciousness is in the brain, and when the brain is dead, the consciousness is gone. That is pretty much what science thinks about it. I'd like to start with science's own view, represented by the well-known and acclaimed neuroscientist Susan Greenfield. Her results are so far leading in the world in the quest to find consciousness, and her conclusion so far is that they have found neuronal assemblies, some nerve cells spread around different places in the brain that lit up or are active in a very short interval of time. And these are, as she says, not consciousness itself, but indicators of consciousness. And that is how far science have got today. So if you did believe, like I did, that there is a center for consciousness in the brain, that there are anatomical structures in the brain that can be identified as the center of consciousness, you are wrong. And when I studied medicine as a doctor, we did never get any clue about what consciousness really is. There is no indication of where it's located. Nobody found it. It has been like that in science for more than 100 years. No one has been able to find the place where there is consciousness in the brain. There is not like the sense of sight has centers, in different centers in the brain, like the visual cortex, but there are about 17 other centers in the brain that are linked to sight. And you can locate them anatomically. You can dissect the brain and you can find them. You can see them light up on scans when you use advanced technology to photograph the brain. But for consciousness, there are no such finding, not on scans, not on anatomical dissection. There are no neurons in the brain that are representing what we call consciousness. So don't let science fool you to think that consciousness is something inside your brain. Consciousness has to be something that are imposed on the brain, or inside the brain, or on top of the brain. It is not a physical structure within the physical realm that we know as scientists today. And there are now many reports about near-death experiences, NDEs, that are coming in from all over the world. The most systematic work has been done by Professor Emeritus Dr. Bruce Grayson from the University of Virginia, and in his book After, he explains about the results they've got after interviewing systematically thousands of persons that have had near-death experiences. And you can also have a look at Dr. Sam Parnia from the United Kingdom. And all these reports systematically that people, when dying, they experience that they still retain their senses. You know, when you're looking at something, the nerve signals goes through your eyes into your retina as electrical signals into the visual cortex. But so what? When they come to the visual cortex, that is just electric signals that activate these brain cells, but they are not your consciousness. You know, these cells in the cortex, in the visual cortex, they are arranged systematically in location, and they light up like the pixels on your screen. But there has to be someone to watch that screen. You know, if you want to surveillance your house, you put up a video camera in the garden, put a cable into your computer, and on the computer screen there is a picture of your garden. But it's no help having that picture on the computer screen if no one sees that picture. There has to be a person to see that picture. And if you imagine the visual cortex is like your computer screen inside your head, when you're looking at something, the signal goes into your visual cortex, and the pixels, if you will, they light up. But someone has to look on those pixels and realize that I am looking at something. And that I is the soul, the consciousness of the person. So what people that have near-death experiences say is that after they die, not always immediately, but sometime after the body is dead, they experience that they are still alive. They can still see, they can still hear, they can smell, they can feel the wind. All their senses are intact, which in my opinion is a strong indicator that the senses belong to the soul and not to the brain. That is the soul or the consciousness that is interpreting the brain, that has a very advanced interface to the brain and are receiving all the stimuli from the body, interpreting them and giving you the experience that this is what you are experiencing, you are feeling, because the consciousness is the same for animals and humans alike. They give us the feeling that you are an individual and you can feel and see the world around you, and that is your experience exclusively. If we take one step further to a Christian perspective on near-death experiences, many Christians believe that, this is nothing a Christian should deal with. It is not a Christian thing, these near-death experiences. If you think that, please go to Acts chapter 14 and read what the Bible says about Paul. When he was in Lystra, he was stoned. They thought he was dead, and they pulled his body out of the city, where his disciples prayed for him, and he stood up and was alive. It seems quite clear to me that he had a near-death experience there, but what he experienced is not written in that chapter of Acts, because that was written by Luke. If you go to a letter that Paul himself wrote, the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, you can read Paul describing in his own words about a man, that he knows a man, of course that man is himself, that was taken into the third heaven and saw and heard things unspeakable that you cannot explain with words. I believe strongly, because Paul says, if I was in the body or not, I do not know. He repeats that twice. So I believe strongly that Paul was stoned, he died, he left his body, had a near-death experience, he went to heaven, and he saw things that he could not explain with words. So that is a good place to start if you want to have the Christian perspective on near-death experiences. If you want to know more, I suggest that you go to John Burke's book, Imagine Heaven, or listen to his YouTube videos. He has, over the last 30 years, studied systematically Christians that have had near-death experiences and put this in a book. And they consistently report that they go into a paradise with green meadows, with flowers, rivers, streams, brooklets, with fantastic color and clarity. The water like crystal flowing through this paradise. And in the center of this paradise is a beautiful, beautiful city where thousands of Christians, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Christians are walking in the streets, living, where the streets are paved with gold, where there are green grass and flowers and trees and birds singing, interspersed between beautiful houses, which reminds me very, very strongly about some verse Jesus said in John chapter 14, and I translate it a bit freely because that is how I understand it. Jesus says that in his Father's world there are many places to be, and I go away to prepare such a place for you to be, so you can be where I am, and that there are many places to be. That is confirmed by the NDEs that non-Christians, non-believers have. They come to a place, not always peaceful, not always pleasant, and they have their senses intact. It is very similar to the experiences that Christians have. But it seems very clear to me that both Christians and non-Christians alike, when they die, they continue the spiritual journey that they ended here on earth. Put in other words, if you lived a holy, devoted life in God, believing in Jesus Christ, you die, you come to heaven, and you go to Jesus, you meet him, you see him, you meet other Christians, you are in this paradise, you go to the holy city. But if you live a life in doubt, in negligence to God, or an unholy life, a blasphemic life, you will continue your spiritual journey where you ended it here on earth. Some report coming to complete darkness, complete quiet, complete darkness, like I suppose Hindus would call nirvana, where there is nothingness, absolute nothingness, but you still exist and you feel that you are still alive. These stories are coming in now in thousands. I will put links below to all the persons I have mentioned, and I would like to add a link to James Woodford's story, a pilot that was brain dead for 11 hours they monitored his brain, and they could see that he was not dreaming or hallucinating. He was brain dead. He was in a respirator. But he came back to life and reported and wrote a book about it that is called Heaven: An Unexpected Journey. You can also see all the 7 episodes, which I strongly recommend, on Sid Roth's channel. It's Supernatural. And there you can truly get a good glimpse of what it means to die and not have everything right with God. James Woodford turned to God in the last second of his life. And when he arrived heaven, he arrived to a place where he could see down to the left the abyss of flames and fire, and to the right the paradise, and he had to continue his spiritual journey where he left off when he left this world. It's a very, very exciting story, so please go ahead and click the link, check out his story, what he has to say. That is all I have to say for today, but my main message is, don't be fooled by science to think that consciousness is something they have control over. They don't have a clue what it is. They have not found it. And I would lead your attention to my humble little picture here on the side that I've called From Hope to Eternity. And if you ever had a near-death experience, I think you can understand why I called it that. So God bless you. Stay close to Jesus. Be safe. Bye for now.